my number one client. They grew 35,000% top line in 3 years.
How do we hire you?
Do you think we need a lot more of that in the West?
Effective leaders do three things, and they do them really well. The founder knowing that stuff isn't enough.
Like, what's the practical way of doing it?
Most founder CEOs do exactly the opposite.
Because the opposite is much easier.
Simon isn't very nice, but this is not about nice.
It's business.
Today we had a talk with Scott Pollock, the CEO and founder of Rogue Scott. He's been working one-on-one with entrepreneurs to try to scale their business for the last 6 years. With 30 years of experience in the industry, 25 of those years in Asia and 18 of those years in China, he has a vast experience in working with companies and founders how to scale and grow their business, with a focus on purposeful entrepreneurship and creating sustainable growth during the scale-up process for businesses in China. We also talked about how you're able to maintain alignment with your goals while being flexible in an ever-changing market. Lastly, we went in and talked about how to get more exposure in China and abroad to be able to grow your business better. This is our talk with Scott Pollock.
Welcome to the podcast, Scott.
Thank you.
Delighted to have you here. I'll do a very quick intro for you. So, Scott is the founder and CEO of Rogue Scott Executive Advisory and has over 30 years experience building businesses in the TMT space. Almost 25 years of those years in Asia, with 18 years on the ground in China. 6 years ago, he made a purpose-driven shift from player to coach, helping entrepreneurs successfully scale their businesses with greater ease, speed, and confidence. Scott also serves on multiple advisory boards, and he's a member of the Board of Trustees of the Shanghai American School.
That covers the business side.
Brilliant.
Anything we missed?
No, that's pretty good. We can go into more detail as we go through it.
Yeah.
Then great. I mean, just for first off, for people who don't know, what's TMT space?
Telecom, media, and technology.
Great.
So, yeah. try to keep it short, but you're right. A lot of people don't necessarily know that acronym.
Great. So I'll tell the audience how we actually met. You gave an absolutely inspiring and real TEDy kind of TEDx talk a few weeks ago, and I was really captivated. It was very measured, your speech. It was very eye contact, and it was very laser focused, but very natural at the same time. A lot of people get in their heads when they give a speech, but your speech was very much engaging. It hit the right points. And how do you actually prepare for that speech? Did you do a lot of practice run-throughs? And
well, it was serendipity in a way. So that was a speech that I'd already given as a keynote almost half a dozen times. And when I came across Ella on LinkedIn and it said that she was doing casting for TEDx, I said, wait a minute, maybe I can take that talk, which I'd already done as a keynote, and convert it into a TED Talk. So I wrote to Ella, and Ella said, oh, it's too bad. We've already been preparing for this for a few months, and it's, the final date is less than a month away. So I wrote back to her, I said, well, would it make any difference if I told you that I've already got a talk that's just about ready to go?
yeah.
She goes, really? She says, well, send me a blurb on it and send me a bunch of other materials, which I got back to her almost immediately. And she said, no promises, but let me check with the rest of the team. And sure enough, she comes back to me and says, sure, you're in. Next week's the dress rehearsal, and here we go. So everyone else was, already for a couple months, they were getting coaches, and I was just like, okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of when you get the best, I think. I mean, some of the best work happens under short periods, right? When you get really, okay, there's a deadline, I have to get things done. Just do it.
Exactly. So I had to cut down. When I was giving it as a keynote, it averaged 20 to 25 minutes typically when I would give it. And I like to make things much more interactive. In a TED Talk, that was part of my problem, was I wanted to be more interactive. And here they're saying, no, you can get people to raise their hand, but that's about as interactive as you're going to get in a TED Talk. You really can't get audience participation, right? So I had to cut it down. Plus, it has to be under 18 minutes. That's a TED requirement for it to be a TED Talk. So, okay, fine. Cut it down, practiced it, and it was fun.
And where do you think those skills came from? Would it be your upbringing, or is it practice? Do you think you're naturally gifted at giving speeches? What advice would you give to any companies as well, because they have to pitch. And I think
Sure.
having those kind of skills is very important. So what advice could you give?
Pitching, by the way, I think is another area where I can go into more detail. But in terms of myself, I've been forcing myself to embrace public speaking from a pretty young age. And I think I did have some natural talent, but I still get nervous. I still get nervous when I've got to go up in front of an audience, no matter what size, and I've been up in front of thousands of people giving talks. So, you know, it is practice. It is becoming more comfortable. It is a learned skill in a lot of ways, but the more that you practice it, the more comfortable that you become. Pitching, on the other hand, and I was just in a pitch competition, so you reminded me, this is a couple weeks ago. One of the Toastmasters groups here in Shanghai invited me to be part of a pitch competition. I said, okay, sure. And they said, you don't have to pitch your own product. You can pitch anything you like. You can, for that matter, make it up. So I decided to make it up. I said, why not? You know?
Yeah.
So I ended up pitching a personal AI assistant for WeChat.
Wow.
Okay. I said, you know, we'll have this at some point, probably not too far in the future. Unfortunately for WeChat, it probably won't be done by a third party. It has to be done by Tencent. It's kind of their walled garden.
Right.
But okay, you know, this is something that everyone can relate to. And that was the key, because if you want to be effective in a pitch, it's not about you and it's not about your product. And that's, you know, I coach CEOs, I coach leadership teams. That's one of the biggest issues that I see all the time. And I mentor a lot of startups who are pitching investors. And all too often they start with themselves and they start with their product, and that's what they're leading with. And instead of really getting their audience, particularly if you're pitching to the people you want to sell to, you've got to get them thinking about themselves. That's the key to a successful pitch. Is that they've got to be saying, that's me. You're talking directly to me, and you know, feeling that there's a real need, there's a real pain point that they need to address. And I think that's where pitches go wrong a lot of times.
Yeah. I thought that was really good during your speech. You know, put your hand up and you get that audience participation. It's almost Tony Robbins-esque as well, you know, leading the audience and getting them. And if you were able to do that on a pitch as well, you're almost
absolutely,
you know, leading the investor to say, yes, I want to invest.
Exactly. I mean, pitching, one of my previous bosses who, you know, I continue to actually help with a number of his businesses, who is a fantastic pitch man. I mean, really one of the best that I've ever seen. And he's raised, God, hundreds of millions of dollars in his career. One of the things that he always used to say to me was that it's almost like you are a lawyer in a courtroom and you're leading a jury to decide in your favor. You've got to anticipate all of the objections, and you've got to get them to get past those objections, right? And that's the only way that it ends up, you know, kind of step by step, getting someone to finally say, yes, of course, I'm willing to buy, or I'm willing to invest.
And where did you grow up, Scott?
So I grew up in Los Angeles, but I always tell people I'm a bit of a New Yorker who was raised on the West Coast. I never actually lived in New York, but I spent a lot of time there. My parents are both from New York. And I don't know if the two of you understand the difference between the two coasts.
No, that's kind of what I want to ask. If someone's, you know, been growing up on the coast of Norway, like, I don't know what's the difference.
Yeah, so the East Coast, and particularly the bigger cities, in New York is obviously the city, right? Is much more frenetic. There's much more pace and energy. Whereas the West Coast, in California in particular, is best known for being more laid back. You know, hey, it's the surfer culture, right? You know, let's go just hang out and go catch a wave. And I think I've always had more of that East Coast rhythm So that actually leads to when I moved to Shanghai, and the first time I visited Shanghai was 2003.
Oh.
And I said, this place is great. I mean, I'd already spent a lot of time in Hong Kong, spent time in Seoul, spent time in Singapore, Tokyo, liked a lot of those cities as well, but Shanghai just was amazing. The energy here. And in many ways, I always did say, and I still say that this is like Manhattan on steroids, because in many ways it's even bigger than Manhattan, right? And when I first visited, I said immediately, I could see myself here. And when I finally moved myself here in 2005, I immediately felt at home. It was because, I think it was because of that energy. I had lived primarily in Southern California, went to school up in Northern California outside of San Francisco to Berkeley. But, those are not places like this. San Francisco is more of a city than LA in many respects, but still not nearly as frenetic as Shanghai.
And that period, the 2003 to 2005, what were you doing and what actually pushed you? Because obviously you were inspired in 2003, thought, wow, I could live here. But what were you doing in that period that then pushed you over? Because in relation to the companies that we deal with, sometimes there is that moment where it's why didn't you move straight away? Why didn't you just come?
Right.
Basically, what forced you in here?
Yeah.
So I started doing business in Asia in 1999. And the first experience was getting off a plane in August of 99 in a full suit and tie, coming to negotiate a joint venture between the company I was working for at the time called Global Crossing and Hutchison Whampoa, which had Hutchison Telecom as one of their subsidiaries, which was one of the biggest conglomerates in Asia. As a matter of fact, to put it in context, I think it was 96, Time had named Li Ka-shing, who was the founder of Hutchison Whampoa and of Chung-Kong Industries, which is the sister company. Time had named him the most powerful man in Asia, which was politically also sensitive at the time because Jiang Zemin was the president of China.
Sure.
But nonetheless,
in the business world, right? Certainly.
Yeah, it was certainly exactly. And this was the company that my boss at the time said, we're going to do a joint venture to land a subsea cable. This was in the telecom space, land a subsea cable in Hong Kong, and that will be our partner for connectivity throughout Hong Kong. Okay, so that's my entry to Asia, really, and Hong Kong specifically. And I mentioned the suit and tie because this was my first time to ever have this experience of being in the city in the middle of the summer, huge heat, huge humidity. Every office tower was air conditioned to the max. Just like you're like walking into a freezer, not even a refrigerator. It was like a freezer, right? And so you're in one office tower, and just to even go across the street to another office tower, and everything is pretty close, right? So sometimes we were going from one meeting over here to another meeting across the street. If you walked outside, all of a sudden you start sweating, and you walk back into one of these places, and it just freezes to you. Right. So you end up like a popsicle. Right. It was palpable. It's like I'm much more afraid of being hot than I am cold.
Right. Okay.
So for me, it was like, okay, I still was happier being the popsicle than I was being outside sweating. Oh God, terrible. But that was my intro, right? And I ended up doing joint ventures in Hong Kong, in Singapore, in Seoul, in Tokyo, before finally Beijing was my first stop in mainland China. That was 2001. And that was, again, I was still with the same company. We were still building footprint. My roles had evolved over time, but that was really the focus. 2003, my first time to Shanghai, that was shortly after leaving Asia Global Crossing, which was a spin out from the initial company. Global Crossing went public. We spun out Asia Global Crossing, that went public. So I did 2 IPOs during that kind of 3-year period, actually a total of 5 years I was with those companies, but within 3 years I went through 2 different IPOs, which was awesome. I mean, it was really
Strong.
I was still kind of a young kid. I don't know. I mean, I joined Global Crossing when I was in my late 20s, and when I left, I was in my early 30s. So the telecom bubble burst. Again, I don't know how well you guys would remember any of this.
Do you want to fill the audience in what was happening back then?
Yeah. So I mean, the 90s was the late 90s was the internet boom, and this was the first wave, if you will, of there's this internet and people can do online businesses and all these different crazy ideas, and there was just tons of them. And that was actually one of the funnier stories that was driving, and this was for real, that was driving the need for more and more internet capacity. So I was in the telecom field at the time, and the US Census, this was actually a turning point. US Census might have been in 96, I want to say, had published a statistic that the internet traffic was doubling every 6 months. Okay.
Wow.
Now, anyone who knows math knows that if something does continue for any length of time to double every 6 months, that it, very quickly you end up with a severe hockey stick. So of course that was exactly what people were predicting, and the investment into internet infrastructure, telecom infrastructure, was frenetic. There were so many different companies that had raised billions of dollars, because of course it cost billions of dollars to lay subsea cables or to put fiber to the home, all these different things, right? Well, end of that decade, late 1990s going into early 2000s, the capacity outstripped the demand. And the bubble in the telecom industry, but it was also going over into the internet industry too. There was just over enthusiasm is the way that I characterize it. People just thought, I can throw money at anything and it's just going to go up. Well,
Yeah, like a bubble.
okay. Yeah, so it's a typical bubble, right? And that bubble burst, and a lot of those internet companies never came back. I mean, Amazon, which was around already, took a dive, but Amazon at least had a real business.
Yeah.
Many of these other companies really had they were gathering eyeballs, and they were getting valued based on how many eyeballs they had, but they had no economic model, right? So that was on the internet side. On the telecom side, it was just simple supply and demand, right? There were too many projects that had raised billions of dollars, built all kinds of infrastructure, and there wasn't enough demand. And that was when Congress, and this is the punchline, Congress goes back and gets WorldCom, was one of the bigger companies that went bankrupt, and gets the WorldCom execs to come before Congress and goes investigating, how did this all happen? Where did this come from? And someone finally investigated, where did that number of doubling every 6 months come from? Turns out that some analyst within the US government had taken that number out of WorldCom's marketing materials and not essentially vetted it. I mean, there wasn't any real, this is, if you're WorldCom, you're out there selling capacity, you're basically saying, yes, we're bullish.
Yeah.
But, so many investment banks had taken that number and actually made bets on it, right?
Oh my God.
And
Just some analysts, some low level, well, not
yeah,
low level, but
whoever
a
it
lower
was.
level.
I mean, I'm not sure what level they were at, but the point was that was how much rigor was behind it. It was basically taken from a marketing brochure, and it somehow made its way into the census, which has more weight than a marketing brochure, right? So it's one of those things where you look back and you say, okay, be careful.
Yeah.
So sometimes during this entire bubble, there was some guy in the US just saying like, oh shit, I put that number in there and now everyone's following it.
Exactly. So that was the context. Anyway, when the bubble continued to burst and a lot of companies, were having a hard time, ours included, we had a lot of infrastructure. We ended up selling Global Crossing was the parent company. I was already in the subsidiary, but there was actually the subsidiary in Asia was doing much better. But the problem was that the parent, which owned more than 50% of the sub, still owed a lot of money to the sub, and the parent had to go through a bankruptcy restructure. Was sold as well. We ended up having no choice but to go through a bankruptcy 2 restructure. Sold to China Netcom, which was the kind of up and coming telecom player in China at the time. And China has restructured its telecom infrastructure several times since then. But when that happened in 2003, I said, okay, I'm going to move on to other things. And the next thing that I ended up moving on to was a startup in China. And I was flying out on a regular basis. We were trying to commercialize some OLED, organic light emitting diode technology that had been developed in an institute up in Shenyang, but that we were trying to commercialize in Suzhou. At that time, it was the new Suzhou industrial area, which today is huge, right? But that was when these things were just starting, and it was really exciting. And I won't go into the details of why that startup failed, as most do, but it got me out to Shanghai several times. And as a result, the next year and a half that I was still working on that project, I decided this is where I'm going to be. So in 2005, moved myself here, learned the language, and went off. That was it.
And then from that point, were you creating your own businesses from 2005, or was there still a bit of a transition and learning period, and then you went full force into your entrepreneurial career? Yeah,
there was a little bit of both, and frankly, even since then. So year one was learn the language. I studied full time, for the most part, at Jiaotong Dashui for a year. Then I went to Gallup in order to be the partner running their Shanghai operation. Spent a couple of years there, got hired away to McKinsey, actually. Got headhunted to build a startup within McKinsey called Insights China. And that was fun. Timing was interesting because that was already now 2008, and I got hired 2 months before the financial crisis, right? And we were basically launching a new tech product that was complementary to McKinsey's core consulting business. Think of it was sort of the Bloomberg for all data and insights China. So it was an interesting business, and it combined some of the things I'd done before, technology with knowledge management and insights. But the timing was really a little bit crazy, right? McKinsey, the good news was that McKinsey at the time came out and said, we're taking a through the cycle view. So they were predicting at the time that the financial crisis would be a pretty sharp V. Yes, things are going to dip significantly, but then they'll come right back. Well, again, you guys are probably old enough to remember that it didn't come back quite that quickly. It ended up being more like a prolonged U, right? So we built that, got it to break even within about 18 months, but because of the prolonged headwinds in the economy overall, McKinsey decided to make that more of a support group, internal focus, as opposed to my expectation and really my goal was to build something that we could spin out. So once it looked like that wasn't going to happen, moved on, and that's when I did my first proper startup from the ground up here in China, which was building some online marketplaces for legal services. So a partner and I basically saw that China was changing, that I think the key thing was that the legal system was playing a bigger role in business. And part of what was driving that was the shift from most businesses in China being very local to being perhaps more regional or even national.
Yeah.
So as China's ascendancy, was taking more shape, and the economy was really booming, we saw that need, and therefore the limitations of Guanxi being the only kind of system for keeping things in order, we saw as being a problem, right? That would need to be solved eventually. So,
What do you understand as Guanxi? Because that is a big. I think it's
a big topic, and it's
Yeah.
it's far from me to try and simplify it,
Yeah.
because that doesn't make any sense. It is, most often it's translated as a relationship, and I mean, at its core, that's what it's based on, at least. But just as many complex topics, you can say, well, it's based on something, but doesn't mean that encompasses everything that it is.
what it actually means.
Yeah,
China.
I mean, it's a relationship, it's reciprocity, it's common understanding, it's kinship, it's a whole host of things that if you try to again say, how can you really understand that? But for instance, it's easier to define if you just say, let's use it, put it in context, right? If I've got a business and you've got a business, we do business together. Well, is a piece of paper going to define how we're going to work together? Traditionally in China, no. You could have a contract, but traditionally, my sense has always been that the piece of paper defines how we're working today, but that might change tomorrow, and then the traditional way to look at that is, oh, well, that no longer applies because things have changed, right? So in the West, we say, well, that's exactly why we have a long form contract. If this happens, this is how we deal with it. If that happens, this is. In China, it's more like, no, our relationship will evolve, and then we'll talk about it, and then we'll figure it out, right? And the notion of rule of law is nowhere near as strong here.
For me, it always felt like the contract is just like the worst case scenario backup that you're having. Like if absolutely everything goes to shit, that's why you have the contract there.
Yeah, well,
because similar like you said, in all of the businesses, okay, I have a relationship with you. That's the key point. But I also know your friend. I have a good relationship with him, and he knows you, and I know that guy, and I know your wife, and that's, I have multiple relationships connecting to you.
Right.
And that's how I'll keep you accountable, and that's how you keep me accountable. So then we have to, when things go south, we have to work it out because we have too many other relationships that's going to be dragged down.
And that is Guanxi.
Yeah.
That is, again, it's not a definition, but that's a good illustration. Is that where relationships are multifaceted, where it's tightly linked again with perhaps face, right, which is another important thing to understand. I mean, face is not uniquely Chinese or Asian. Face exists everywhere, right? But here, perhaps it's just given a little more emphasis, right? So we've got a relationship. I don't want to lose face with you if we've got a real relationship on which we're building a business relationship. We build it on top, right? But also with the other people, maybe I was introduced to you by my brother who is married to your sister, whatever it is, right? So traditionally, that's where business happened. There was already some deeper relationship, right? And now we say we can do business together, and as you said, that's what keeps people accountable. It's a good word for that because they don't want to disrupt the harmony of those relationships.
I got an very early on when I was in China, trying to understand this whole concept. I got an illustration which is based on this, which we just talked about, where it's basically every person is like a knot, like the knot in a fishing net. It's like everywhere, that's people. So what happens when you take on one spot of the fishing net and just push up, then everything else around is going to keep going up.
Right.
And the same way it keeps going down.
Right.
So if you keep losing face and looks bad, when you're always the person who's going down, what people are going to do to avoid keep going down, they're going to cut it.
Yes.
And then at the end, you're gonna keep everything's gonna be cut, and you're gonna be falling down by yourself.
Right.
But if you're the person who keeps going up and look good, everyone's going to connect to you because
Right.
they want to follow that trend upwards.
It's a good
And
analogy.
I think that was a sort of
Yeah.
easy way to understand it.
Good metaphor. Yeah, I think that makes sense from what I've seen.
Yeah.
Far be it for 3 foreigners to sit here and
Yeah. I mean that's the
define
next.
Guanxi.
Yeah.
I think as a foreigner, we can never we can have a foreign view on it.
Yeah.
We can never fully understand it or experience it.
Yeah.
Because it comes with family relationships, all of the other relationships that you get, and we just
I think
You can't really get there.
I would even characterize it slightly differently, which is that we can experience Guanxi as well as anyone else, but we'll never be Chinese.
Yeah.
And that's the key, right? So foreigners absolutely can have strong Guanxi, and in the political arena, in the business arena, there's plenty of examples of foreigners who had relationships, deep relationships in China for many, many years. And indeed, there is significant Guanxi, but it's just the understanding at the same level that someone who is Chinese, as you said, has the family aspect. I mean, that's the other thing that most of us, at least, don't really have going for us is if there's 3 primary sources, has been my observation over time. There's 3 primary sources of Guanxi, or circles, I should say, that someone who's local Chinese has. They've got their family. We don't have an option for that, right? Our families are not Chinese, so okay. They've got their schoolmates, and that starts from kindergarten to elementary school to high school to university, right? And so forth. And then they've got their workmates. The one that we have an option for is probably the workmates. I mean, those foreigners who actually did come over here perhaps to go to university and really immerse themselves might have some additional Guanxi there, right? But those are the 3 primary circles.
I would say since I did my whole bachelor in China at the University of Nottingham, and there's now when we're starting to have worked for a bit, you do really notice a difference in people that you meet in work compared to your classmates. I can call my classmates at any time and they will answer and they will sort of help me out. And there's a very strong, but it's two-way street. It's also expected that I do the same. But that is, it's a very powerful thing. And I think it's very difficult to sort of describe this to someone who hasn't experienced or at least been here and seen it firsthand. But
And again, I don't think that concept is completely different than the West, for instance. I mean, can't talk to in the Nordic countries because I don't have experience there, but Europe and the U.S. in general, I would say, or North America, you still have that notion of, okay, we went to university together, and you've got your alumni base. I think that the difference is that perhaps there's greater homogeneity here, right? Which maybe helps to make for closer relationship. That's a hypothesis.
Yeah, do you think we need a lot more of that in the West? Because certainly coming from the UK, particularly when it comes with sharing assets and value exchange and trust, I would say with British families, generally, there's a more independence when you graduate from university, you're kind of on your own. Whereas in China, there's a lot more, I wouldn't say the reliance on the parents, but certainly your parents are there to step in. And if you want to borrow money or start a business, there's a lot more of that happening here. Obviously, it'd be great to hear an American perspective. But in the UK, I think we do need to learn a lot more from China in that sense of that homogeny that you've said. And maybe having a bit more trust in each other and sharing of assets, sharing of, if I'm creating a business, come in on this.
Yeah.
Isn't that just also as well that we have a very individualistic society? Yeah. I mean, especially, I know Sweden is, we're on topping all of the rankings on individual individualism, and it's kind of like, okay, you're done and you're out. After that, no, sure, I mean, it's still parents and child relationship, but it becomes more of a friend relationship.
Yep.
While here is really like, no, we're still a family, like we are building our asset bank together. And while in Sweden, we're just, okay, it's a bunch of individual people. We're never going to pool our money to do something bigger.
Right. Yeah, I think there's so many differences, and it's, I'm not sure, we have enough time even to go into it here. But one of the, when I said that homogeneity here, most of China is Han Chinese. That's one aspect that we don't have in most Western countries, at least, right? Certainly the U.S. is a complete melting pot.
Yep.
Right. UK, again, is it really, anywhere near as homogeneous? No.
Oh no! I mean, London now is a melting pot of cultures and different nationalities, and
Exactly.
So
So
we from North Norway maybe should just shut up.
exactly. So maybe some of the Nordic countries a little more homogeneous, but then there is that spectrum of are we a clan versus are we individuals, and what are we the education here is much more about valuing harmony of the collective, over the the individual spark, right? So anyway, getting back, I wanted to get back to where we were originally even going with this, right?
the business, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that was the plan.
That was the plan, right? Once I moved here, right, it was about first getting into doing business here and using. Early on, one of my objectives was to use the language. So that was also why working for some of the companies I worked for was helpful. I was managing teams that were primarily Chinese, and I had to really leverage that. But then over time, it became just looking for opportunity. The last business that I built, and this, Daniel, you and I have compared some notes, was a multi-channel network. And it was really the first of its kind. Today, there's so many MCNs, or it's a very different flavor, frankly, than it was then.
And what is an MCN? Just to explain, because I do get that question a lot. What is an MCN? What is a multi-channel network?
So I think in order to explain that, you have to look at what were the initial MCNs, and then perhaps say, well, how are things different today in China, which you know better than I do. Even I've been out of that game for over 6 years. But the initial MCNs were on YouTube, and the notion was that YouTube itself is a collection of channels. It's self-media, right? Anyone can start a channel on YouTube and can produce their own media and can put it up there and can have essentially as much followership as they're able to generate, right? So the early YouTube creators, as they're called, we're building all kinds of different channels. And then not too long after that started to take off, of course, a business opportunity emerged, which was to say, okay, what about creating an aggregation of channels, and the MCN becomes that business, the multi-channel network, and the MCN business starts to provide services to those creators and to those channels. Because over time, actually, it wasn't just independent creators. A lot of those channels became businesses of their own, small production companies, if you will, or even some of them large production companies, depending on the direction they took. But the initial MCNs were saying, okay, we can help you to promote your channel. We can help you to bring brands to advertise against your channel. YouTube's initial model was really to sell advertising across the platform. And if you were getting more eyeballs, that meant you perhaps get more ads, and you signed up for that. But MCNs were doing things like brand integrations, or helping to go to a big brand and say, hey, this creator has an audience that aligns pretty well with your audience, your target consumer. Would you like to put your soda or your shoes or whatever it is, same way that you have on television, really, and that becomes different flavors of brand integration. So that's where it all started. In China, when we launched our MCN, this was back in 2013.
Very early.
That's
for
very
the
early.
MCing
Yeah,
game, yeah.
yeah, it was very early.
Pretty much exactly when WeChat launched, right? Was that 12?
Was it just Weibo?
No, it was prior to WeChat.
Was it just Weibo as the platform? Right?
No, actually, so
And Renmin.
Yeah, it's
video.
Renmin like that.
Remember, we're talking video, right? So the first video platform in China was
Youku.
I was going to say Yoku.
Tudo.
Oh, Tudo, of course. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Tudo was first. Yoku
course.
was a fast follower,
Yeah.
and then they merged later on, right?
Right.
But we were partnering with Yoku Tudo. By that time, they'd already merged, right?
Right.
We were partnering with IGE, with later on Bilibili. We had about 16 different platform partners. Okay, and that was one of the big challenges in China, was that there was not one YouTube. At least at the time, YouTube was dominant in the video space. Today in the US, I think there's obviously more, with TikTok and other things.
Yeah.
There's more
It's not even
competition.
comparable to here. I mean, China is so varied of the number of platforms that we're having. Sure, in the West, we mean like, oh yeah, we have YouTube and then Netflix and then a few other.
Yeah,
But
I think it's actually more consolidated today than it was then.
yeah,
So Douyin, I think, and you tell me, I think Douyin probably is the most meaningful today for most of at least the brand integrated type video.
Certainly, but Xiaohongshu and
Xiaohongshu,
even
sure.
WeChat, the WeChat video and their live streaming capabilities now has really
Okay.
created a dent.
Okay.
Little Red Book in particular is a more affluent audience, I'd say.
Okay.
So we do a bit of work on Little Red Book as well.
Okay.
And you could ever discount the relevance still of Weibo. A lot
Right.
of brands still use Weibo, and,
Sure.
and obviously Bilibili for the younger audiences. They're the future generation of consumers. So, but there is some truth in saying that Douyin does have that punching power.
Yeah.
But it's in the last 2 or 3 years
There's
as the
competition.
competitors have come in. Yeah.
And what's changed dramatically, and again, I'm out of it for too long to really even consider myself an expert anymore, but what I had seen even when I exited in 2017, changing dramatically, was that there was finally video commerce coming to fruition, where that was always the holy grail. It's one thing to say we can integrate advertising and get impressions for a brand, but it's a different thing to be able to say, hey, this video sold 100,000 units.
Yeah.
And wow, or that live streaming, which was really just coming into its own back then, being able to move millions of products, with live streams during 11/11 or whatever it might be, right? So that was a big advance. But these were all, it was happening in real time. It was happening in real time, and in many ways, I'm very glad that I'm no longer in media here, because it also was the regulations were getting fraught, especially if you're a foreigner.
I think one of the things that I see with a lot of the brands who are working here is that media is becoming more and more difficult to navigate.
Yeah.
It's becoming more and more options. It's more and more regulations. It's heavier and heavier costs. And you see a lot of brands now trying to look at what are alternatives to going into that space.
Right.
Sure, you can't say like, oh, I'm not going to be on social media, then suicide. But I'm not going to put my big effort here. I'm going to do things, for example, like I'm going to do offline stuff and then try to bring people online.
Right. Right. Yeah,
So
I
I
mean,
think that's right.
e-commerce continues to be huge, and the percentage of retail that is online just continues to grow.
Mm.
So in that sense, okay, you have to be. and digital media, of course, feeds into e-commerce.
Yeah.
So it is the connection now. It's not as much advertising, although I'm sure, I don't know the recent statistics. I'm sure advertising continues to be significant, but a lot of it is direct lead generation or direct conversion. Even forget just having leads. It's like how do you convert sales directly out of media?
Yeah, I think live streaming is really the only way to really track it, because then you actually see the sales data. But you do need brand awareness. I think to downplay brand awareness as an investment in China is would be a wrong move. It certainly needs Little Red Book, WeChat, Douyin are the three platforms I always say. Simon and I have a little bit of disagreement when it comes to Weixin Gongzhonghao. I mean, Weixin Gongzhonghao probably back in 2015 was the place where you wanted to read articles, and now it's people just have a flick through and they maybe like it. But it's interesting to hear 2017 you exited.
Just to mention people, like Weixin Gongzhonghao is official WeChat accounts in English.
Writing articles.
Exactly.
Right? And I always find it works for B2B and it works for education institutions, schools and universities. They plug something once a week. So 2017 you exit, which is an interesting time. And I was going to ask you why, but it seems like probably for your sanity as well. Being in social media, it does have quite a toll on, and with the competition coming, you mentioned regulation. So from 2017 to now, you've built an incredible business, and it'd be great to get a little bit more insight into how you built it, what you actually do, and how you provide value for your clients.
Sure. So I decided after that I really wanted to take a break. I wanted to figure out what's next. I wanted to, what's the right way to put it? I wanted to be more thoughtful about my next steps. So I took a few months and I wrote a one-page personal plan, which was hugely influential, and helpful in making that next move. By the way, one of the things I did with that was, one page, by the way, gets you to prioritize, right? Anyone can write a long letter. It's how do you write the short letter? And the famous quote was, if I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter. This was really that kind of prioritization exercise. What's most important to me, not just in business, actually. This was a personal plan. So, family, friends, community, career, money. So
I think your own happiness as well,
all of that. Yeah, I mean, happiness I think comes from really focusing on the things that are most important to us. So this was more about how do I make sure that I'm putting my energy towards the things that are most important. And then one of the things that I learned was I shared that to my wife, and that was really helpful because she knows me well, and she was able to call bullshit.
Yeah.
But no, that's your ego talking. Like,
accountability.
Let's. I don't think that's really you. You're probably right. Go back to the drawing board. Right. And okay, I made a few refinements, but what came out of that on the career side was that I wanted portability and flexibility. I was able to crystallize whatever I do next. I need portability and flexibility. Portability means I can do it wherever I am. Flexibility means I can set my own time. Right? My daughter was 3 years old at the time, and I said I want to be a really active father. My father was a workaholic and then retired when I was 18. He was 47. So in a lot of ways, it's like, that's a great role model. But the only problem is that my father had me when he was 30, and I had my daughter when I was 45. So I didn't want to, that gap, I don't want to wait till I'm a grandfather to be able to spend time with kids. No, I want to have a really deep and meaningful relationship with my daughter, and that was a big part of what was driving me. That was one priority, and then that said, okay, on the career side, I need to focus on something that gives me that flexibility. that I can spend the time where I want to spend it and still be able to focus on the things that are meaningful to me. And that was where coaching, which is what I ultimately decided to go into, and particularly scale up business coaching. So helping other entrepreneurs, most of my clients are founder entrepreneurs, and they have built a business that's successful. So this is not startups per se, although I still love startups. So I mentor a lot of them. But my clients are the founder entrepreneur that's already built a successful business, but has reached some kind of ceiling in a way for themselves and is struggling. Many of them have actually, seen the business take a few steps back, maybe even a couple times, because they got beyond where the foundations of the business could really support their growth. And they say, okay, I'm ready to get some help. And that's where I focus my energies.
Can you name some of the challenges that these companies have had and how you've been able to pull them through or give them solutions to come out?
So first of all, I can't pull a company through and I can't give them the solutions. But as a coach, I would say the most common issues that I see with businesses that are ready to scale but that are struggling to do so. One, there's accountability issues. So and this is linked to what I typically call the founder has become, or the founders have become, the bottlenecks in their own business, right? So you've got founders who have built a successful business, but have struggled to really delegate to others. They're holding on, right? So control is sometimes a big part of this. They've built a team, but they're working harder today, even with a team of what they think are capable people, than they were when it was a small business, and they were in that startup phase. And a lot of that is because they're in the middle of everything. They want to be in the middle of everything, by the way, or at least their belief, and actually sometimes they don't want to be in the middle of everything, but their belief is if they're not in the middle of everything, that things are going to go wrong, right? So they've got to be making all the big decisions, but that by definition means they're the bottleneck, because the number of decisions to be made grows as the business grows. And this is where accountability comes in. So they've got, as an example, a head of sales. And oftentimes I'll meet an entrepreneur and I'll ask them, by the way, about their leadership team. So the leadership team are the members of their team that are truly accountable for at least one key function in their business. And that function might be marketing, it might be sales, it might be production, it might be customer service, finance, right? I'll start asking them about those people, and say, well, I've got 5 people on my leadership team. Great. So who are they? Okay, you got a head of sales. Wonderful. So does your head of sales own sales for your business? Meaning that ultimately they're the ones accountable. The buck stops with them. Oh, not exactly. Like, essentially, as the founder, I'm still the one that is accountable for that, but I've got someone to do the work or to manage a team underneath them. Well, then they haven't really built a leadership team. What they've built is a bunch of people that they're directing, right? But they will continue to be the bottleneck. And as the business continues to scale, that doesn't scale. So, that's a good, I think, example, if you will, but it manifests itself in a lot of different ways. And then that cuts across all of the key foundational systems for scaling a business. I these days I think about businesses and the foundations of businesses in terms of systems. And there are 6 key systems. 3 of them are what I would call soft-edged systems. And 3 are the more hard-edged systems, which most people are familiar with. But the soft-edged systems are every bit as important, if not more important, than the hard-edged systems. And that's where I think a lot of founders also struggle. So what are those? Just to share with your audience.
Go for it.
The soft-edged systems, there's the cultural system, which is your values, your purpose, your long-term vision. All right, these are all really important and foundational for building a business that's able to scale, because it's not enough that the founder or founders are aligned on that. Everyone has to be aligned on that if you want the business to really be moving in a direction together. There's the cohesive system, and starting with the leadership team, do you have a healthy and aligned leadership team? That's systematic, and it's really difficult to scale a business where you don't have that. But there are too many businesses that have, or too many founders, I would say, who haven't put enough emphasis on that. And that gets into a whole host of different symptoms, but you really do need to have that leadership team healthy and aligned. And healthy means, by the way, that they can have real debate too. So healthy doesn't mean that no one ever speaks up. That's not healthy. And then there's the human system, which is the full life cycle of talent in your business, right? Where are you sourcing that talent from? How are you screening the talent that's the right talent for you? How are you onboarding? How are you developing? How are you weeding out the people that are not the right talent anymore? Or perhaps, they're not in the right role. So all of those things, which again, bigger businesses tend to have a whole lot of infrastructure around that, but oftentimes the startup that grows into being a scale up hasn't quite put those things in place. So those soft edge systems are really foundational. You have to have them. And then the hard edge systems, everyone knows: strategy, execution, cash. Okay, those are again three critical systems. The way I come at those is a little different though than most perhaps. I mean, strategy is about simplicity. If everyone on the leadership team to start with, and then cascading into the business, doesn't know what is the unique and valuable position that we're going after in our marketplace, and how is that defined by activities that we do that are differentiated from those that our competitors offer, then good luck. I mean, your execution is not going to be aligned with your strategy if people don't know what that is. And all too often, that's not even captured to begin with. But if it is captured, it's also not cascaded properly through an organization. So, the founder knowing that stuff isn't enough.
So if you can I just jump in on that one?
Yeah, sure.
Because how would you say, what's the practical way of doing it? Because it's always difficult to, this is generally leading people, right? How would you get that message through, and how do you make sure that it sticks? Especially if you're sitting in China and if you're running an organization, it's very likely, you're based in Shanghai, or you might have an office in Guangzhou, and then one in Harbin, and then one in Wuhan or whatever. How do you make sure you get that message in a way that you can get it out to people, and then it's digestible? It doesn't become too big and heavy when it's here's a book, read it.
No,
that never happens.
It can't be a book. So this is why simplicity is not easy, by the way. So
yes.
Simple doesn't mean easy, right? But you have to get it down to simple. I actually really like pictures. So there's a book that amongst many that I like, but one of my favorites these days is called The Three Hag Way. Shannon Susko is one of my mentors and coaches, and she's the author of that book, and the book helps brings a framework for building strategic pictures, because a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? If you can get your strategy into a set of pictures that everyone can understand, and at different levels, there's different levels of understanding too. That's okay, right? So what the leadership team is talking about has to be translated to what does it mean to you, or what does it mean to me if you're somewhere else in the organization, right? You've always got to be asked, what's in it for me, right? But the same, to your point about, or to your question about, how do you disperse these things or cascade these things throughout an organization, particularly where there's people in different offices or different cultural backgrounds, right? This goes to leadership. What do leaders do, or really effective leaders do? One of the things that I like to repeat myself, and you'll hear why I'm laughing, is that effective leaders do three things, and they do them really well. They predict. So prediction is really important. Anyone who says that they're an effective leader has to be telling their people this is where we're going. And that doesn't necessarily mean they have a crystal ball or that they're predicting what's going to happen 5 years from now, but even next week, this is what's coming. This is what we're doing, right? They have to be able to delegate. It goes back to what I was talking about earlier with accountability. Delegation means that you're handing off accountability, but it's not the same as abdication, right? It's not the same as, oh, now I no longer have to worry about sales. No, if you're the CEO of a business, you better be worried about sales. However, the person accountable is your head of sales. And so there's that interplay, right? And then number 3, repetition. Repetition. Effective leaders are constantly repeating, not necessarily in the same words, although you want to play off of the same words. Words are powerful and they take on meaning. But for instance, with strategy, and that goes back to your question, every time that we're going to make a decision, repetition means telling your people how, or helping them to see how does that tie to our strategy. We're trying to take this unique and valuable position in our marketplace. We made this decision because this puts us on course for that. Had we made the other decision, it would have gone against that. So that's an opportunity to repeat. Culture, right? How do you make sure that your culture is strong? Well, constant repetition. But what does that look like? Well, people talk about recognizing people. Well, when you recognize someone, there's a lot of different ways you can do that. One way is just to say, hey, that was great what you did there. Great job. Okay, that's a wasted recognition in my book, because yes, there's a little bit of that kind of attaboy kind of positivity, but what would have made that much more useful if you're talking about reinforcing culture would be, can you tie that recognition to one of our core values or to our purpose and say, here's what I just saw you do. That was great, Daniel. That ties to this core value, which we hold dear. And by the way, the result of what you did there was our customer called me and said, I really like what Daniel did for me, right? So now I've made that recognition into a reinforcement mechanism. You feel good the same way, but it's much more meaningful. And oh, by the way, other people who maybe heard that recognition say, oh, okay, I get it. Here's what I can do to be more aligned with our core values, or here's what I can do to make decisions that go more in the direction of our strategy. Right?
It's a very nurturing quality as well. I've noticed that in your approach. It's looking after your employees, but like you said, also giving them positive reinforcement and it deals with the issues that we have encountered with attrition of staff. If staff are empowered and inspired, then they're more likely to stick around, and giving them those opportunities. But like you said, not just saying did a great job and leaving it there, is tying it back to the business, back to the customers, so they feel a part of the business rather than just an employee.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And these are, whether you want to call it leadership or managerial skills, these are the kinds of things that great managers, great leaders do, right? And when people leave, you talk about attrition. When people leave a company, this hasn't changed over time. And it's certainly no different in China than it is anywhere else in the world. When people leave a company, typically they're leaving their manager. More times than not, they'll tell you, oh, I got offered 20% more salary, but that's not why they're leaving. They're not leaving for the extra 20% in salary. They're leaving because they feel this is a dead end. Their manager doesn't care much for them, doesn't help them to see the path, whatever it is. There's a whole host of reasons, right? But if we can, in our businesses, if we can make better managers, we will have better retention. But it's also, there's a whole host of other things that go into that. It's clarity. So when I talked about the human system, people want to know what's expected of them as well. And too many businesses struggle there too. What's expected is very hazy, right? And so at the end of a quarter, a year, whenever there's feedback given, it's always a guessing game. I think I did well. You know, and the manager comes back and says, well, I would have liked you to have done things differently. Well, okay. But that guessing game doesn't enable the kind of engagement that we really want. So, but that goes back to the systems and the foundations.
Yeah, but I mean that's easier said than done, to be honest. Having had teams all over China and worked with teams all over China, it's not always easy to. It's just such a hard thing to do, to work with people. I don't think it's a China problem. It's just generally
it is
it's
not a China
hard to
problem.
work with people.
And that's why I said the soft edge systems are the hard stuff.
Yeah.
For most.
But then again, if you don't work with people, you can't grow something. It's sort of like, oh, I'm going to do everything myself. Yeah, no, but then it's not gonna. It can just become that big, and that's the limit.
Right. And
that might be good, but if you want to do something bigger, you have to have people in it. If you do everything yourself, you're just gonna burn out.
That's the point. And you become the bottleneck, and that defines, in some ways, the limitations of your business. Now with AI, that's a whole different topic. Maybe there will be the ability for individuals as founders to just work with AIs and to eliminate some of the some of the human factor. We'll see where that goes. But today, as you heard in our panel today, even with AI, the challenges are still human.
But I feel with AI, one thing that, because I keep hearing this, especially when it comes to sales and this kind of stuff, like, no, AI is going to take it over. And my idea is like, no, I don't think so. People want to have people there. And that's kind of the whole thing, because we already have enough infrastructure to just say, no, sales is just going to go fully automatic. You're going to have a buying system who's going to talk to everyone else's selling system and then just kind of figure out what's the best optimal deal mathematically. Yeah. But we don't, because we don't like that.
Right.
We want to have personal interaction. Like, even for small stuff, if I'm buying ice cream, I'll talk to you. I know that's your shop and I want to buy from you.
Right.
I'm buying from you and then you happen to sell this ice cream. Why am I not buying from Daniel, who might be selling the same ice cream, right? Because
there's a lot of human factor.
Yeah.
And that is the point, right?
So
AI is already, I think, changing the marketing game. Certainly, one of the areas that, again, I used to have a lot of insight into was direct marketing and digital direct marketing, and AI is clearly changing what goes on there, right? You'd be silly to not be leveraging AI in that space, running A/B testing and automating a lot of that. But you're right. I mean, in particularly B2B sales, are we to a point now, if the buyer is still human, then I think there is the need for a relationship with another human.
Yeah. So relating that to your business, I would have thought a lot of obstacles you have is a company will come to you and say, well, why do I need this? Why do I need this coaching with you?
Yeah.
Are you able to show to these companies, look, here is clear ROI after a year, we've had all these sessions, and you can clearly see an increase in sales or an increase in turnover or loyalty with staff? Have you been able to show that? Because I think that is a big challenge that a lot of coaches have, that to really show the ROI.
Sure. So it's a great question, and the reality is that this goes back to what you said earlier that I sort of corrected you on. I can't go changing someone's business.
Yeah.
I can't. At the end of the day, I'm not going to take on accountability for sales in their business, and therefore I'm not going to get credit if their sales increase. However, the way that in my business, the way that I've been able to address that is I talk about guaranteed impact. Guaranteed. And how do I do that? Well, pretty simple. The relationship that I have, it's always directly with the CEO, by the way, head of the business, usually the founder. They are signing up to work with me on a month-to-month basis. The expectation is it's going to be longer term because building a business or scaling a business is a journey. It's not a sprint. Okay, it takes time. That's the expectation. But month to month, if either side, and I've fired clients before too, if either side says this is not really going where we need it to go, then you're gonna be out. There is no teeth in my contract to say you're beholden to me as a coach. More important than that, though, is, you know, in my very short half a page contract, I'm a lawyer, so I love the fact that I made this it's the uncontract contract. In that short contract, there's a clause called a short pay guarantee. And what it says is, if you didn't get the value that you thought you were going to get, pay me what you think it's worth, which means zero if you believe that, hey, this wasn't what I thought I was signing up for. Fine. And you know, knock on wood, I haven't had to worry about that, because my clients do get value. And one of the things that I've also been able to do since I've been doing it for long enough is to get clients to give me testimonials. So on LinkedIn, for instance, you can see a dozen testimonials from CEOs of the value that they've gotten. But ultimately, they're the judge of value. I can't be the judge. So to your point, it's not going to ever be, oh, your sales doubled. You know, obviously I added value. Yeah, you know, there's the systems are too complex for that, right? I can't claim, you know, my number one client, actually my earliest client, continues to be a client today, but it's now over 6 years. They grew 35,000% top line in 3 years. 35,000%.
And how do we hire you?
but I'm the first person to say I can't take credit for that growth. They happen to find right product, right market, right time.
Yeah.
And you know, took off exponentially, right? Became a unicorn virtually overnight. When you're growing that quickly, it doesn't take much, right? But even though I can't take credit for the growth because that was them, I can certainly take credit. And the CEO who's now on the board, he's actually no longer even an exec, he's back on the board level, will certainly give me credit for helping them keep the wheels on the bus. When a bus is accelerating that quickly, it's all too easy for the wheels to just come flying off, right? They grew from 13 people when I first started working with them to 350 people, I would say, at their peak, again, in about a 3-year period. And so in that case, I was talking to the CEO weekly. Usually, most of my CEO clients, we're talking probably monthly on average, or at least we do talk every month, but we'll have a deeper conversation at least once a month, let's say. With that CEO, it was weekly, and we never missed them. I mean, every year we would maybe have 50 weekly calls out of the 52 that were possible, because there was enough changing every single week. There was something to talk about. There was some issue to drill into. And as a coach, this goes to the difference between a coach and a consultant too. As a coach, my superpower is asking the right questions. My clients tend to have the right answers, but they've also got a lot of their blind spots, and they're not necessarily asking the right questions. So what they're looking to me for is to leverage both my experience, which I've got plenty of, plus the frameworks that I've gotten 2 certifications in business coaching, and I've picked up a lot more along the way, right? So the last 6 years of just being a coach, I've been growing and learning. And they're tapping into that for me to be able to have the right perspective, to ask them powerful questions that help them to get outside of their blinders, that help them to see possibilities. Because ultimately, especially if you're the CEO, you want to be able to consider a broad range and then figure out how to prioritize and get back to what's important. And that's where a coach can be helpful. So it goes also to your question, why is someone going to hire a coach? The reality is that it's not commenting that they're not effective CEOs. Many of them are very effective. They built successful businesses. That's not easy. But today, and Silicon Valley, I think, is sort of leading the chase in this. Effective CEOs know that they need coaches to be the most effective they can be. And Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos, Eric Schmidt, I can go on and on, all have or had coaches.
Yeah, I mean, speaking from personal experience, I've really grown to understand the importance of coaches, not just personal trainers, yoga and boxing, whatever it is, but really with business as well. The value that it has, and actually, it's not expensive. It's actually very cost effective. If it has a 35,000% or and you're a contribution to that. I think that's the word. Certainly it wouldn't have been that number had you not been there.
And my point is whether it would have or not is not even what I'm selling, right? So as a coach, if I can quite simply, and this is where I think things start, if I can help a CEO and leadership team to get more clear alignment, more clear accountability, better performance with less drama, more cohesiveness amongst their leadership team. These are things that, regardless, I mean, I unfortunately had clients that have gone into downturns and they didn't grow like what I was talking about exponentially.
Yeah.
But the CEO in those cases, and I've had a couple of these, has said, perhaps if we weren't working with you, we wouldn't be here anymore. Like, to make it through hard times when the cohesiveness of the leadership team is equally, if not more important, right? Because now, let's face it, during hard times, this is when founder CEOs perhaps go back to their leadership team and say, hey, can we all take a 20% pay cut because cash is tight right now and we're going through this COVID downturn. This is real. I mean, you talk about real examples.
Yeah.
We saw this.
Yeah.
And if you have a cohesive and aligned leadership team, you're able to do some of those things. Not every company was. And of course, there are many companies that are not with us any longer today because the downturn, that was the end of them.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, that's a hard thing. Like, this is things that I have to do myself, which is always difficult when you realize one part of the business is not working out.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I had a company that was doing in Wuhan, where we were doing trade, and it didn't, simply said, it wasn't working. And then at some point you have to make that decision, like, no, we have to cut that off.
Mm-hmm.
What's your tips for that then? Because I mean, that's hard. It's a hard thing to go to people and say, like, you have to take a pay cut, or we have to lay off people. Where in the whole world do you start?
Well, okay. I mean, there's no one size fits all.
Yeah.
But I think that one of the disciplines, if you're the head of a business, one of the disciplines that you need to take on, I would strongly suggest is critical. And then you've got to cascade that into your organization, is the notion that it's A to stay. And what I mean by that is we want a team of A players. And again, I like simplicity. It doesn't make it easy, but to put it in simple terms, an A player is someone who fits our culture. And usually that means alignment with our core values. And someone that is productive in the role that they're playing, meaning that they're delivering the outcomes that have been agreed. If you have both of those things, right, good fit and delivering, that's an A player. If you are missing one, in simplistic terms, maybe that's a B player. If you're missing both, really simply, that's a C player, right? They're not a fit for your culture, and they're not delivering. C players, unless you think they're going to be able to change, which they rarely are, usually you have to give people an opportunity, and that's statutorily, certainly. I mean, in China, if you want to let someone go, you need to give them all kinds of opportunity, and you got to do it in writing, and it's formality. But that aside, you tell someone, look, here's the behavior that I've seen from you that is not fitting what we're expecting, and I need you to change. Most people won't be able to. Some people, there's always exceptions, right? Some people might. On the culture side, on the productivity side, is it that they're new and they still haven't come up to speed? Maybe, but usually rule of thumb, 6-9 months. If they're still not delivering, now you can ask the question: would they be better in a different role? Maybe. In a different role that you need? Maybe. You got to ask these questions. So again, the answer with a B or C player is not immediately you got to let that person go. But if you go through these other possibilities and there isn't another good role for them, and they are continuing after giving them plenty of training and coaching and everything else to not perform or not fit, sooner rather than later, you got to let them go. The old adage, which still holds very, very true in business, is hire slowly, fire fast. And of course, most founder CEOs do exactly the opposite.
Because the opposite is much easier.
Yeah, well, hey, I needed someone in the seat, so I hired the first person I could find, and they've been on board already for 2 years. Yeah, they never delivered, but I kind of like the guy. I don't want to look like an asshole, right? So the reality is that CEOs and other leaders are people too, right? So my take on all of this is that yes, we do want a harmonious culture in our businesses, but and here's the key here: you can build a harmonious culture of accountability. Those two things are not at odds with each other. And as a matter of fact, when you've built that harmonious culture of accountability and people know that across the board, everyone is expected to deliver, right? But when you do, you're recognized, you're given opportunities to learn and to grow, you can have harmony. You can have harmony. And that, I would say, every company has their own culture. So it's not to say that means that every company has the same culture. No, but though that aspect, harmonious and having accountability built in, is critical to being able to scale, at least with less trauma, with less drama, with less issues. And unfortunately, that's a challenge. Yeah. So as you said, you're struggling. How do I fire that person or that partner? But the answer is, if you were clear up front about the expectations and they were written down and understood, there shouldn't be a problem. The problem's in your head, because you're saying, hey, they're not going to like me, or other people are going to say, wow, Simon isn't very nice. But this is not about nice. This is not about nice.
It's business.
It's business. And oh, by the way, when you do fire someone or you do walk away from a partner relationship, I always emphasize that you want to do so in a very professional, very polite. This is not about being an a-hole. It really isn't. This is about, if you do it the right way. First of all, when you talk about people who are really not a good fit and not delivering, they know it. People know it. And oftentimes it's a relief for them, because showing up to work every day and knowing that you're not delivering on what's expected of you, that's no fun.
Yeah.
That's no good, right? But if you, as an example, say, we've talked about this a few times, I've given you some coaching, it's still not working out. I've got to let you go, but I want to make sure that you're able to land on your feet. If this is a person, again, hasn't stolen from you, hasn't done anything that that goes in that direction,
they
right?
haven't done anything particularly bad. It's just
right. So
it's not working.
So the point is think about what can you do to treat them fairly.
Yeah.
Right. So you don't want to screw people, right? But at the same time, fair doesn't mean that you got to bend over backwards, right? Think about it. Is there an expectation of severance? If there is, don't try and screw them out of their severance, because other people are going to be watching, right? Is there an opportunity perhaps to give them a positive reference on the things that they are positive on? And you can be clear about that. Hey, you know, if you need a reference for your next opportunity, I'm happy to talk about how, you know, you've always been a very supportive person, that you're, you know, bright and energetic in the office. Obviously, you're not going to lie about, you know, if this was a salesperson and they never closed a sale, you're not going to tell their next opportunity, oh, by the way, that was my star salesperson. So, but can you be honest and truthful, and at the same time give something positive? That's what other people will see. And I've seen it before. People that I've let go have come back to me for years and saying thank you, because I was able to, you know, they weren't a fit for a particular role, but I was able to help them on their career path, and I treated them with respect. I think that's what people want more than anything else. They want to be respected. And oh, by the way, as leaders, we don't need to be liked by our people, but the great leaders tend to be respected. And there's a difference. There's a difference. Leaders, you know, they talk all the time about, okay, you know, if you're the CEO of a business, it's a lonely position. It is. It's a pretty lonely position. And you don't want to try and make best friends with everybody, because there's too much conflict in that. You can't. It's impossible. It's impossible to be best friends with everybody. But can you do the right things? Can you be consistent? And of course, as humans, okay, we're always going to make mistakes. That is the human condition. But can you be as consistent as possible? If these are the values in most entrepreneurial businesses, the values of the business and the values of the founders are pretty well linked, right? You know, you founded that business. This is what you want. And can you be consistent about it? And if you apply that consistency, that's what people will see. That's what people will respect, that, right? Yeah, you know, not my favorite person in the world, but I really respect what Daniel has done. And you know, I've learned a lot working with Daniel. That's what you want people to come away with. If they happen to say, oh yeah, and Daniel became a role model for me, great. But you're not going to be a role model for everyone. And that's okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Scott, inspiring, clearly someone that's built a profitable business that is actually converting as well and creating impact, which is really great to hear. Key takeaways for today.
God, I mean, there's so much. Where in the whole word to start? I think one thing that I'm going to just steal straight off from you, which I'm going to try to pick your brain later, this whole sort of like a vision idea, like one-page vision, because there's always one thing that you're trying to do here, like, where the hell am I going? And I kind of have an idea, but it's always it becomes like a book. So I'm going to try to steal that. Okay, I'm going to force myself to get it down, and I'm going to use the upcoming holiday to get that down to one page. So I have my own vision clear. And then after that, into my own business, I want to work a lot on implementing the soft edge system, because the hard edge, I think we're stronger on that side. So we need to make sure both of them are sort of up to speed. And then, work on becoming respected, maybe not always liked, but, you know.
No, I think your team do respect you, and you're very nurturing as well.
I hope so.
What I've really taken away is the putting your energy into things that are most important, which is very, very key. And the accountability. I think really having someone there, or your team, a partner that is there to kind of call BS and say, no, let's look at this another way. This is not you. And this can apply to a person or a business. I think it's really, really great. So I've learned a great deal today, Scott. I really appreciate your time. If people want to find you, where can they, if they want to get in touch, if they're a business or a founder, a CEO, they want to explore your services. And also, you're a great speaker as well. I've seen you speak. I've seen you on panels. I've seen you moderating. I've seen you on the panel. So if people want to get in touch, where's the best way?
I'd love to be doing more keynote speaking. The best way is probably still LinkedIn. So Scott Pollack, Pollack, pretty easy to find there. There's a few Scott Pollacks, but mine comes up pretty quick. I do have a website for my business as well, and that is roguescott.com, ROGUESCOTT.com, and people can find a little bit more there as well.
Great. We'll put those links in the
Absolutely.
description. And obviously, subscribe to the Panda Profits podcast. We're growing the socials, and we're on Western social media, Chinese social media. So feel free to check us out. We'll have the full podcast and also clips as well, which we're quite excited about. Lots of content coming.
There's a lot of coming, and I mean, we have a good list of speakers lined up as well. So
Good list of speakers, and we'd love to have you back, Scott. I think we've got a lot of unfinished business here. There's a lot
This
of.
was fun.
it was fun.
We'll do it again.
It was good. So
We could have kept going for quite a while. I mean, I have just so many topics I want to keep diving into, but
Yeah. Well, we'll cut it for today, and
Yeah.
we'll come back another time.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.